I know my story is not a unique one, though. The Congressman's legacy lives inside of so many of us. His memory will live forever, not through the monuments we build, but through the lives he changed. Thank you, John Conyers, for saving my life.
That was wonderful, Donahue. By the way, I've been around so long that he was a page when I served in Congress. My name is Jim Blanchard, an old friend of Nate Conyers, Monica, and the two boys. I'm honored to be here. I promised Bishop Ellis, and I should also say to Chrisette, thank you for your hospitality. I would be brief. This will be the shortest, almost the shortest speech on record that I ever gave. I actually knew and worked with John Conyers Jr. for 45 years. There are very few people that could say that. I appreciate being allowed to speak today, but I think that's one of the reasons. We were good friends, close friends. He was my loyal friend. I heard of him 10 years before when he won that primary by 128 votes. Remember that, Debbie Diggle mentioned. 128 votes. He won his primary in 1964. I met him in 1974 when I was elected to Congress from my hometown of Ferndale and Oakland County and Macomb County. And it was exciting to meet him because he was known as a civil rights firebrand, a fighter, anti-war fighter, a person who defended unions and jobs. You should say jobs, justice, and peace. But what was remarkable to me was when I sat down with him, he was mellow. He had that soft, welcoming voice. He worked well with everyone, as Representative Goodlatte said earlier, Republicans, Democrats, liberals, conservatives. He could work with anyone, even though he might not agree with them. A couple other things I want to mention. I said he was my loyal friend for 45 years. That was true when I was in Congress, when I was your governor, when I was ambassador, and as a private citizen. I think he was better to me as a private citizen sometimes than when we were colleagues working on stuff. But he was so loyal. He was loyal here in Michigan, in Washington. Even at Virgie Rollins' Christmas parties, he was there. I would also tell you that he was so loyal. I once had an opponent who was a Democrat who switched parties to become a Republican. He went to the White House to get Ronald Reagan's imprimatur, and then he turned around and ran against me. John was so fierce. He went after him with a vengeance. He was so tough on him, I started feeling sorry for him. He was so tough, we had to tell him to cool it, please. Now, you know that he was dapper. The truth is, he was probably the best dressed member of Congress these last 45 years. It wasn't just nicely, he was the best dressed. And you heard about talking about jazz. He didn't just form the Black Caucus, he formed the Jazz Caucus. That was alluded to a little bit. But here's my jazz story. So one day I'm on the way to the House of Representatives. We're going to go into session. I hear on the radio that Nancy Wilson has been involved in an auto accident. So I enter the floor, the chambers, and I say, John, I just heard that your friend Nancy Wilson has been involved in an auto accident. He dashed from the chamber. The next thing I knew, he was on the phone with Nancy Wilson, of course. He seemed to know everybody. He went everywhere. He seemed to be interested in everything. Finally, let me just simply say that I want to repeat what was said about the staff. He had a wonderful, wonderful staff. He was a pioneer in so many areas. He loved this city. He loved his constituents. He loved this country, this world. He was, yes, a fighter for peace. All I can say for John Conyers, my friend for 45 years, my colleague, you fought the good fight. You led the way. May you rest in peace.
Protocol being established, let me greet my friend and brother, Bishop Charles Ellis, and First Lady, and all of you who are here, to the congressional members that are here, to all the political and religious leaders. I do want to just say a word of thanks for allowing me to say something about my friend and brother and mentor. This is personal for me. This man was my man. I don't care who don't like it, whatever your issue is with him, John Conyers was my man. He was my friend. He was my brother. He was a colleague. He was a mentor. And to Monica, to Carl, and to John III, and to Nathan, God bless you. Thank you for allowing John to be with us. Let me say this, in 1957, when Ghana became the first independent nation, Kwame Nkrumah, Minister Farrakhan, who was the first president, and when Ghana was the first nation, said these things: those who would judge us merely by the heights we have achieved would do well to remember the depths from which we started. John Conyers was from Highland Park, Michigan. John Conyers was Detroit. John Conyers helped put the D in Detroit. John Conyers was the man. Thank you, Ray. Thank you, Yolanda. Thank you, Juan. Thank you to the staff. Thank y'all for staying here. We know some people had to leave, but John would have stayed here no matter what time this thing began. John stayed with us through thick and through thin. John was a welder. John welded things together. He brought policies and people together. On Sunday morning, he would come to Fellowship Chapel when we were on 6 Mile, and he would come and have breakfast between services. Many times he would come and be in my office before I got in my office. He would come sometimes not to church, but to have breakfast. We had many conversations about the issues of the day. I thank God for the times that we had. My only regret, Joanne, is that we did not record those conversations for the purpose of history and posterity, because they were rich. I want to thank John for opening up his office. His office was a sanctuary for everybody, particularly for Detroiters. He turned it over to you. His staff would go and get you sandwiches and go and get you pop, and then you would have jazz to eat and to listen by. It was nothing to go into the office and to walk into a Herbie Hancock or to a Marcus Belgrave or to a Miles Davis or to Wynton Marsalis. They were all in John's office. It was nothing to see Stevie Wonder, because John was a wonder. John was a treasurer. He was consistent. He was a leader, and he was our own national treasure. John was one who was smooth. He put the word smooth before V98.7, put smooth jazz into smooth jazz. John was smooth. He had a vision, and John did not and was not afraid to stand alone. John stood for people when people refused to stand for John. That's why we love John. That's why he's our man. That's why we will never forget him. That's why we're here today. Yes, he brought H.R. 40 to the table. He put 40 in H.R. 40 because we never got our 40 acres and a mule. That's why it's H.R. 40. So we thank you, John. And as I take my seat, Maxine, you from St. Louis, I'm from St. Louis. When I was in St. Louis, we grew up, me, my cousin, Louis, Tyrone, and Eddie Boy. And I said Tyrone. Everybody that got a Tyrone in their family. Matter of fact, some of y'all might be Tyrone sitting out there. Tyrone was always on the edge, but we would climb trees. We would climb trees, Jesse. We would climb apple trees and peach trees and pecan trees. But there was always, when you climbed the tree, there was always one apple way out there on the limb. The sun would be hitting it. The leaves would be glistening. And you knew you had to get that apple. Well, I was a climber. I was the best climber among the cousins. So I would climb to the top of the tree, and I would go to that limb. Sometimes you could not go to the limb. You'd take a stick, but the stick would bruise the fruit. And so you didn't want to bruise the fruit. You had to crawl out on the limb, and you had to shake it, and then the apple would fall down on the ground. I knew I would would not be the one to get the apple because I was in the tree. John Conyers went out on the limb for us. He shook the tree for us. He shook the limb for racism, for sexism, for union labors. John Conyers shook the tree for us to pick up the fruit. The question for y'all is, who will pick up the fruit and who will shake the tree? God bless you.
The one and only Wendell Anthony. My brothers and sisters, Reverend Jesse Jackson. We're going to hear a few notes from Joan Belgrave, and then the family will close out the remarks.
To the Conyers family, John lived his eulogy every day. Great outstanding remarks today, and we want to leave here the same day we started. So I'm going to give the family a chance to express themselves. We have coming up an outstanding vocalist, Arthur Du Bois Harris. If you've not heard it, don't miss it. If you've heard it, you wait on your own. One of the profound preachers of our time, preacher philosopher, Michael Eric Dyson, Tabernacle, Frederick Sampson, John Conyers' man. We'll give the eulogy today, and I want to really spend some time to listen to what Michael has a lot to say, and he says it. Well, Michael, we thank you. Give Michael Dyson again, right? Everything I was going to say already been said. But what I do want to say is that a few days ago, the Washington Senators won a baseball game, the World Championship. They were underestimated. People thought they couldn't win, but they won. One day you hit the home run, next day you drop the ball. When it's all said and done, it's the box score. 90 years of John Conyers lived, 90 years. Some hits, some runs. What's in the box score? He played the most games, played the most innings. He had the most hits, most runs batted in. He enabled Coleman Young to become mayor. Dick Hatcher, Carl Stokes. Well, he had the most run batted ends. Few errors along the way. But John now, as we shot our best shot, John has something else to do now. He has to now meet a righteous judge. Breaking news in heaven today. Rosa Parks and Dr. King and Mandela preparing to welcome after John. What do you say when John gets in? Well, you look at 90 years, he lived 57 years longer than Dr. King, kept on living. Wouldn't be a King holiday if it weren't for John Conyers. Wouldn't be a monument in Washington if it wasn't for John Conyers. So we thank God for all he represents, all he means to us. At the end, the boss, John, is a champion. He is a full-blown Hall of Famer. Most hits, most runs back then. Mandela came to Detroit to thank John Conyers. That's why he came to Detroit. So I want to say that I want to express my thanks, really. I met John in 1964 with Dr. King. He marched down Woodward Avenue with Dr. King and C.L. Franklin. He marched in Cobo Hall when Dr. King gave the first I Have a Dream speech. Dr. King was killed, some rioted, some wrote resolutions, he wrote legislation. Every day for 15 years we gathered out front of the Washington Monument, cold, John fought the odds, reaching the apple that Wendell talked about. So today we want to express our thanks to you, Monica, and the boys. You guys have great legacy. You lost a lot. You have a lot left. I tell you, and I close on this note. So I really want to hear the family. I want to hear Audrey, and I want to hear Dyson speak today. That the king said to me, he said, Jesse, you know, when Martin died, I wish it had been me. I wish it had been me. But it wasn't me. Y'all came to the funeral in big numbers, and the cameras are rolling, and the people singing. When the funeral was over, I used to go out to the graveyard and talk to Martin, sit down and just talk to him. He'd talk back to me. I talked to him, he talked back to me. And one day I heard that my son, A.D., had been killed. He drowned in a swimming pool. Before I could adjust that, my wife was killed one Sunday morning. I put so much focus on Martin, I forgot what I had left. You've lost a lot. Nathan, John, Monica, you have a lot. Say, we the people, in the lineage of John Conyers. We lost a lot. We have a lot left. A lot of legacy, a lot of joy, a lot of memory, lots of hope. Now he's going to court tomorrow morning. Breaking news. Before the judge says, if when you give the best of your service, telling the master you've done your best, he'll say, well done. John, you've done your job well. You made Dr. King proud. You made your family, you made Detroit proud. We miss you, John, and many of us will see you in the morning. Love you, John.
Thank you so much. My name is Joan Belgrave, and I could tell you what John Conyers meant to me, to the world of jazz. My husband was Marcus Belgrave. That's right. We were here celebrating John's 50th year in Congress, right here in this auditorium. We buried Marcus in this auditorium. We buried Aretha in this auditorium. And now my brother John, we're sending him home. I'm not going to take a lot of time to tell you how wonderful he is, because you all know how wonderful he was. I'm just going to let our music speak for it. Thelonious Monk. John loved Thelonious Monk, so we're going to do a little bit of that for you, like we did in D.C. Dizzy, he was screaming next to O.P., who was beaming. Monk was thumping. Suddenly in walked Bud, and then they got into something. Bias blew a mean sax. Mr. Max Roach beat a mean axe. Monk was thumping. Suddenly in walked Bud, and then the joint started jumping. Every hipster really dug Bud soon as he hit town. Taking that note nobody wrote, putting them down. Ooh, O.P. pulled a mean string down, and Dizzy played a hip thing. Monk was thumping. Suddenly in walked Bud, and then they got into something. But do you do that? Oh, sweet do do. But do you we up? But do you do we? But do you we didn't we didn't we? Ow! You do that, you do baby, you do that. Beep bop, but do you do we that we that we that we that we? Ow! Do we but hey. Sweet up, but do you don't we that do ow! his office, right? Dizzy, he was screaming next to Opie, who was beaming. Monk was thumping. Suddenly in walked John, and then they got into something. Bias blew a mean sax. Mr. Max Roach beat the mean axe. Monk was thumping. Suddenly in walked John, and then the joint started jumping. Every hipster really dug, but soon as he hit town, taking that note nobody wrote, putting them down. Ooh, O.P. pulled a mean string. Don and Dizzy played a hip thing. Monk was thumping. Suddenly in walked John, and then they got into something.
Congressman loved his jazz. I ask all of you all to stand as the first family come to give their remarks. Carl Conyers, the youngest son, John III, the eldest son, his brother, Mr. Nathan Conyers, who just turned, we just celebrated 87 years back this summer. And then finally, Mrs. Monica Conyers, our sister and our friend. Receive them as they come.
Hey, everybody. One, just want to thank everybody for coming. I appreciate you guys still being here. I think the first thing I wanted to start off by saying, so I go to school in Houston, so I'm kind of always back and forth. And so, you know, sometimes when you're in two different places, you think you have something somewhere, and it's really back in the other place. So I thought I had a pair of black shoes here, and I didn't realize this until last night. So I ended up wearing a pair of my dad's shoes, but it's just funny because anybody who knows him knows how much he loved milk, like milk or chocolate milk. He would go to a place that you never thought had milk, and he would make sure he got some milk. So I picked these shoes out, and of course, what's on there? A milk stain. Yeah, so that's just very much my father. But I just had a couple of things that I really, just points really. My brother has the eloquent speech, but I just had a couple of things that I wanted to say about him. First one being just, I mean, some of these other people have said it, but I lived it, just knowing how much that he loved me and my brother. If you were ever around us, it was even the way he said our names was never, he would never just say, hey John, hey Carl. It was always with like, oh, Carly or Johnny, or, you know, he always had like nicknames for us, and it was literally every single time. Like, now that I look back on it, I can't even think of a time he just like would regularly say our names. Like, it was every time. You could just tell how much he like really cared about us and how much he loved us. And I can definitely say, like, growing up, it took me a while to kind of realize that, because as everyone else has said, you know, he was always back and forth and not always there. But when he was there, like, you could tell how much he cared about us, and he always showed it, and he always wanted to take us places and made sure that we were taken care of. My dad, even being a congressman, having this legacy, he never forced that upon us. You know, if that was what we wanted to do, it was what we wanted to do. But anything in life, like, he always just wanted to make sure that we were happy, make sure that we were doing the things that were gonna make us the best people possible. Just really wanted us to be great individuals, and made sure that, I guess, we did it we had our own way, and we were never just, you know, just doing what he wanted us to do or just doing what our mom wanted us to do. Just made sure that he was being there to support us and what we really, truly wanted to do. And so I'll always appreciate that. I know, like, for instance, when I was going to school in Houston, my mom definitely didn't want me to go all the way down there. And he didn't initially want me either, but he was the main one, really supported me and made sure, like, okay, Carl, if this is what you want to do, then I'm going to be there and support you. And he actually took me down there for my orientation. So something I really, really appreciate. Yeah, my dad was goofy, man. Like, maybe, being on the politics side of it, you might not always seen it, but like, he was just a really, really goofy, fun guy. Like, he was always smiling. I can count on one hand the amount of times I may have ever seen him like really, truly mad or upset. He was just a great energy and a great person to be around. He really had a presence. And it's something that me and my brother have talked about is just like being in the house. He didn't always have to say anything to you. Like, even my friends and cousins can talk about this. Like, you just always knew my dad was in the house, whether it was like the random times he was getting up, walking around, going to get the paper, eating a bowl of Wheaties, or watching the TV at random crazy times. Like, you just always knew that he was there, and he had that presence about him even, definitely in the house, but even when he went other places, he didn't have to say anything. He didn't have to necessarily be the center of attention to really be the center of attention. And that's just one of the great things that I look at for him. And honestly, he was just a really, really great person. And to have all these people come up here and say so much about him truly speaks to that. But I just know that, my whole life growing up, I've always wanted to be the type of person that he was, just the way he's always been revered and respected. And this showing today makes me want to do that even more. So I just appreciate you, Dad, for everything that you've done for me, everything that you taught me, everything that you taught me with your words, and everything that you taught me with your actions. Sometimes you didn't have to say anything. It was just seeing you do the things that you did and seeing how other people around you reacted to it. Definitely gonna miss you, and I love you. Thank you. Real quick, one thing I forgot. This was just kind of funny. Not a lot of, I'm 24 now, but even back when I was maybe like 16, there's not a lot of 16-year-olds who can just know the name of a House resolution bill. But HR 676 is like something he talked about all the time, and that was the universal health care bill. And like, yeah, they all know about it, but it just speaks to him. Like, he really, everything that was important to him, you knew about, and he always made sure that like we knew what was going on and kept us involved. And I just appreciate him for educating me and everything else that he did.
Well, I guess it's the afternoon now, so thank y'all for sticking with us this whole time. I think there's supposed to be an audio clip before I speak that it embodies what I'm going to talk about. So, Mr. Bruce, if I could get that 30-second or that 10-second clip, I would be quite grateful. Do we have it? Oh, don't worry about it.
I do things when I want to. I'm working on my time clock, not my parents', not yours, not the general consensus, but on my own.
So, while I have this platform, your ears, hearts, and minds, I want to talk about three things. The first of which is time. My father was born in 1929, at the inception of the Great Depression. While I was born in 1990, I have gained a breadth of knowledge in my 29 years as my father did in the 61 years before my birth. That had to be blended. As parents and children, our obligation is bridging generational gaps that no doubt exist so that we may grow closer, create stronger bonds, learn from one another, and build something new. That takes patience. To accomplish goals, you need patience. The Martin Luther King holiday legislation took 15 years to become law. That took patience and resilience. My father introduced HR 676, what we now know as Medicare for All, in 2003. And HR 40, the Commission to Study and Develop Reparation Proposals for African Americans Act, in 1989. Those two pieces of legislation are only now gaining momentum and media traction. To accomplish the goals you have set, you do not wait. There are tasks to be completed while you work towards the ultimate goal. Those are the little things. You have to be patient, trust in your purpose, and stay the course. Stay the course, be resilient, even if it takes 53 years or 5 decades, and you never see the fruits your tree may bear. Which brings me to the reason we are all mourning here today. Our present and our future without John Conyers Jr. Everyone breathing in this sanctuary is someone's future. All of us embody the prospects of someone that has passed. The man that lays here before us was propped up by the foundation my grandfather, John James Conyers Sr., laid as an executor for the United Auto Workers. I put that in there for you, Uncle Nate, because you always talk about my grandfather. I often see pictures of him on the walls of Local 600. And when I leave the stage today, whatever I go on to do is enabled by not only Nathan Conyers, Congressman John Conyers Jr., my mother, Monica Conyers, but also, and most importantly, Lucille and John Conyers Sr. It is enabled by what James Baldwin did and empowered by what Bayard Rustin did. It is enabled by what Nipsey did. It is enabled by what Big did, by what Pac did. It is enabled by, oh no, not this page, it's this page. It is enabled by what Toni Morrison did, what Nina Simone did, and Maya Angelou did. Miss Angelou once said, "I come as one, but I stand as 10,000. Whether you are someone like myself that comes from a well-known family or your family is less known, know that your culture, our culture, Black American culture is accepted worldwide as popular culture. Most people don't know that my father was a radical Black man, even though he had to navigate waters that didn't allow him to be so. So I'll conclude with this. Often we feel that we have to prove, that we have something to prove, or that we have to do something over and above, and within a human-made time frame to be sufficient or worthy, or that our Blackness isn't excellent unless we accomplish amazing and notable things. I want every person breathing in this room to leave and know that whether you are 50 or 15, our legacy has been paid for in full. Harriet paid for it, Frederick Douglass and Asada paid for it. Coleman Alexander Young and Mumia paid for it. Reginald Lewis and Michelle Alexander paid for it. John Draper paid for it. Miss Willoughby paid for it. Sylvia Rohn, Fred Hampton, Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, Hattie McDaniel, Debbie Allen, my Uncle Jesse Jackson, Charles Ellis III, John Conyers Sr., and John Jr. have paid for it. We must honor them all by doing what we can to add to it and pay for those coming after us through our work, and know that our work, whatever it may be, is enough. Thank you.
Wow, that's like coming after my husband. I can't do that. Let's see. Well, I want to thank Nicole, Daydan's wife. I told her to find me something that I can talk about my husband, because I really don't want to say very much, except for he was a good father, and people are saying, oh, you know, we're praying for you. We feel sad for you. Don't feel sad for us. Don't feel sad for us. I feel sad for y'all, because y'all don't have nobody to fight for y'all no more. So while y'all was all downtrodden them out, who's fighting for y'all? Can you pick up the phone and call your congressman's office? Can you pick up the phone and say, Congressman, I need you to come here to do this? Congressman DTE about to turn my light bills off. Congressman, they about to do something with my mortgage. I'm about to get evicted. Congressman, they about to take my house from me. Can you call? You got anybody you can call for that? I know you could call Reverend Anthony, call your ministers, they got that benevolent fund, but can you call somebody? Really call somebody who's gonna pick up the phone and call somebody and stop it in an instant? No, You don't have nobody. So I just want you to be mindful of the people that you elect and be mindful of the people that you allow into your circle. And make sure that you get people who are going to help you, because that's what it's about. It's about helping you and not taking accolades for anything that you do, because that's what my husband did. So I want to leave you with this, because he said this is what you all should do in your life. Let's see if I can turn it up.
Following your heart, doing what your conscience tells you is right, and trying to make this a better place wherever you are, whether you're in school, whether you're in Detroit, whether you're in anywhere else in the country, to make the most of it, and to remember that the footprints that you leave behind of yourself are the ones that you'll be remembered for. So make them large, make them prominent, and make them bring enjoyment to everyone.
Bye, big homie.
The Conyers family. At this time, we're going to hear, please stand, we're going to hear from Professor Dr. Reverend Michael Eric Dyson. After he has concluded, Audrey DuBois Harris is going to give us our final selection, and then Reverend Jim Holly is going to give us the benediction. Swanson Funeral Home will come after that, and as we are preparing to leave, Chief Ratcliffe is going to give us To Dream the Impossible Dream. Let's receive Professor Dyson.
To Bishop Ellis, First Lady Minister Ellis, to this incredible family, Sister Monica, Brother Carl, Brother John, and Brother Nate, and to all of the members and ministers of this great congregation, to you, my brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. What a profound honor it is to be here, to add my voice to the already eloquent roll call of figures who have talked about Congressman John Conyers today. Behind me on one side, the Reverend Jesse Jackson. Behind me on the other side, Minister Louis Farrakhan. The wings of great black leadership. And in the middle, the Jay-Z and Beyonce of black Pentecostalism and American church tradition, the Ellises. And I want to thank the Reverend Marcia Dyson, my wife. She saw a cake with Congressman Conyers on it. She said, "Baby, I'm going to do the same thing for you." She is 7 years my senior, though she looks 10 years my junior, and she has the confidence to believe she will outlive me, and I have no doubt that she has spoken the truth. I want to turn your attention very briefly to the book of Ephesians, the 6th chapter and the 19th and 20th verses. And there, from the basic Bible in English, you will see and read these words. "And for me, that words may be given to me in the opening of my mouth, to make clear witness without fear the secret of the good news, for which I am a representative in chains, and that I may say without fear the things which it is right for me to say." Just briefly, I want to reflect on that majestic phrase, for which I am a representative in chains. I simply want to reflect on representative. On May 16th, 1929, the day that Congressman Conyers was born, the Detroit News lists the weather forecast as rain or snow, preceding a generally fair outcome in the weather. But there were two articles in the news the day that Conyers was born that are arresting to me. The first article was one in the Detroit Free Press about life's psychology, and it was entitled The Beginnings of Race Prejudice. And there the author spoke about the start and beginning of prejudice in young children. It begins as a trait of color that the young child is arrested by and then fearful of. The interest in the different child starts as curiosity, which morphs into resistance, which morphs into fear of the other, that the article says then moves into a perception that the other child is inferior. And so the article says that the adults who should know better reinforce the perception of the child that the black other, the colored other, is inferior, and that they, as a white child, are superior. And the article goes on to talk about the way in which that gives way to unconscious or conscious antipathy toward colored people. The second article was about a man who was an industrialist and businessman named Mr. Young, who was addressing the Versailles Treaty of 1919, where the Allied powers were trying to extract reparations from Germany for damaging its civilian population. And because those reparations had not been forthcoming, they then modified the demand for 132 billion marks, $33 billion in American capital that Germany was supposed to pay. It struck me that John Conyers was born to do what he's doing, what he was born to do, to deal with race prejudice and to talk about reparations, to speak about the vicious consequence of white supremacy in American culture and the defense of black people against those vicious forces. These two stories suggest that his life was situated by a divine arrangement to do what he did. He didn't just stumble upon what he was doing, he was born to do this. He was born in 1929. Another black man was born the same year, one in January and one in May. And these two black men, it seems by divine arrangement, one would become the greatest black freedom fighter that this world has ever known, arguably the greatest American we produce in the name of Martin Luther King Jr., the other, the greatest black political force in Congress that we have ever seen. It seems that God arranged it in 1929 that these two black men would be born to address the situation that we are in. And so it seems to me this scripture suggests too that John Conyers was conscious of being a representative. The word says you ought to represent your God without fear, that you ought to be a representative who could get the words that were necessary to tell the truth without fear, and telling the truth without fear, knowing what to say. And so representative is what John Conyers was. What was he? A representative of his city. Reverend Jesse Jackson leaned over to me and said, Negroes from Detroit love being from Detroit. Yeah, we do. Is there another city? I'm glad for New York and Miami and Philadelphia and Chicago, but ain't nothing like Detroit. And John Conyers represented Detroit. Aretha Franklin, Smokey Robinson, the Temptations, they went to Northwestern. I don't know who went to Mumford. Oh, Earl Klug did. That's great. Bishop Ellis did. That's great. The Temptations alone cancels all that out. John Conyers loved Detroit. Another man was born in that same year named Berry Gordy. 1929 was a rich year for black boy joy and the expression of black genius. And so Detroit was that city. But think about it. He was 14 years old when the first race riot in 1943 occurred. Because of the great black migration, black people were drawn to this city in numbers, and the white ethnics who were here resisted the incursion and intrusion of those black folk, so there was vicious antipathy from white folk to black folk in 1943. And then later on, he became a megaphone for justice in our own city. But he never stopped loving Detroit. I don't care how much love he got on the national and international scene, he loved Detroit, because there's something special about black folk in Detroit. I won't diss nobody else. Every ethnicity is here, but black Detroit is something special. When you think about a Coleman Young, when you think about a Ken Cockrell, when you think about a Monica Conyers, when you think about John Conyers Jr., when you think about his genius and his eloquence and his insight, there's something beautiful about black Detroit. You saw Stevie Wonder up here. We funeralized Aretha Franklin from here. There's something beautiful about black Detroit. We black and we don't care who know. We black and we embrace it. We black and we love it. There are some people who are accidentally black. Them Negroes just bumped into their blackness. Then there are some who incidentally black. They just happen to be black. And then there are some who are intentionally black. They black on purpose. They don't just happen to be black, they make their black happen. And that's what John Conyers was. He was intentionally black. He didn't go around winning office trying to appeal to a race-transcending configuration of maudlin and middling and inadequate forms of political response. He was deeply rooted in the blackness of his birth in a city that was unashamedly black and that celebrated that blackness from the very beginning. And he also represented his country. He represented this country when he went to Korea, fighting for something he couldn't enjoy back home, fighting for something that black folk couldn't enjoy back home. If you speak to the Reverend Jesse Jackson, he remembers his father and those black men who were on a train after we had German prisoners of war in America in World War II. They were sitting in first class, right? The German prisoners of war who were white, who were foreign, who were part of a Naziist tradition. And in the second class citizen car were black soldiers who died or who were willing to give their lives for America. John Conyers represented a country that was not as good as his ideals and ambitions, but he kept on representing the country despite the fact it didn't deserve a man as great as him. But he kept representing this country. He represented this country when he stood against Nixon. That's why he was on his enemies list. John Conyers did not care. He stood against presidents and he criticized them even when they supported him. From LBJ down to Donald Trump, he was in office. He celebrated the first black president, but he said, I'm sorry sometimes for having to defend your can if you can't get in there and do what you got to do yourself. John Conyers was unashamedly in defense of his country. But then he represented his culture too. John Conyers was jazz. Smooth, mellow, flawless skin, powerful hair that adhered to the sartorial standards and the follicular fidelity of the time. Whether it was slicked back or whether it was puffed out as a fro, he had it going on. With that thick black mustache, somewhere between Friedrich Nietzsche and John Shaft. Between German existentialism and black gut bucket, blaxploitation glory. He was jazz, smooth and improvisational. He knew how to speak the language. His voice like a tenor saxophone, like John Coltrane, his friend, amplifying the dulcet tones of a people who were dipped into the waters of oppression but came up with a beautiful sound. He represented his culture. But also, my brothers and sisters, he represented his community. He did not mind saying that he was going to put a bill forth for reparations. Just to think about it, there would be no Ta-Nehisi Coates talking about it without John Conyers. There would be no ADOS talking about reparations without John Conyers. John Conyers understood that black people are part of a great diaspora. Now, some of us have taken reparations to mean only the descendants of African people in America. He understood that blackness was more complicated than that. So he wanted reparations for black people in this country who have been victims of white supremacy, social injustice, economic inequality. He knew that many slaves were dropped off in Caribbean culture and then those who were brought here, but we multiplied because we had a desire to be great. We excelled beyond the oppression that they put on us, and he represented us. He represented us unashamedly and embraced us in those bills. Violence against women, he stood for that act against violence against women. He wanted violence against women to be foregrounded and put forth in public policy so that women's lives and bodies were not vulnerable. He talked about the need for those who were poor to be represented. And so he was a representative of his community. And finally, he was a representative of his Christ. I met John Conyers as a boy at Tabernacle Missionary Baptist Church, where Reverend Johnson is the pastor. And in its heyday, when I was coming up, the Reverend Dr. Frederick George Sampson was the pastor. Watch out now. God stands on tiptoe expectancy. And he was the pastor. And I remember John Conyers as a boy. I was proud of Damon Keith, Elliott Hall, and the great John Conyers in that church, giving me an example of what I could be. I was a po' boy from the west side of Detroit on Furwood between Timon and Moore Place with Mixon's store at the corner in the hood when we were doing what we had to do. But God looked down on me with favor and gave me access to the upwardly mobile Negroes of the black bourgeoisie in a church that allowed me to fix my sight on what I could become. And John Conyers mentored me and gave me a sense of what I could be because he represented his Christ. And the Christ I believe in believes that justice is what love sounds like when it speaks in public. I'm tired of these white evangelicals going around the country talking about if you don't support the man who's in office now, God will judge you. You are heretical. You have heresy. You pimping black people in your church, evangelist white. You riding in on the glory of black Pentecostal Baptist fury eloquence and eloquence, the rhetorical positionality delivered by black people who were baptized in the waters of suffering, and now you are pastoring them, but you are kowtowing to a white supremacist. You are kowtowing to a man who is proud to be unmolested by enlightenment. You are kowtowing to a man who stands up every morning to excrete the feces of his moral depravity into a nation he has turned into his psychic commode. That ain't the Christ I know. That ain't the Christ that John Conyers knew. If you're gonna be a Christian, stand up and love your people. Stand up like John Conyers and embrace black people. Somebody better vote and represent like he represented. Oh, I forgot to tell you, there's one more story in that paper that morning. Then I'm gonna take my seat. There was another story of a well-known businessman from Detroit, white man, but he was speaking at the YMCA in Pittsburgh. And he told this story full of black vernacular, like how Negroes be talking. But what it showed me is that black folk gonna win, as the brothers in the street say, irregardless. That's belt and suspenders. We want to make sure that phrase stands up. And so he told the story. He said there was a man during Reconstruction who met a traveler, and he killed the traveler and stole his mule. And he was tried in a border town between Georgia and Alabama, because that's where the crime occurred. And so the paper says there was a colored judge. Ain't God good? And the colored judge was standing in judgment over this man. And he says, we's got two kinds of justice here in this land. We got Georgia law and we got Alabama law. Which does you prefer? The man thought a while. He was very anxious. He said, oh my God. He said, sir, I think I want Georgia law. And the judge said, well then, sir, by Georgia law, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to fine you $10 for stealing the mule, and I'm going to hang you for killing the man. The man spoke up. He said, wait a minute, Judge. Wait a minute. I got that wrong. I don't want Georgia law. I want Alabama law. So the judge says, correct. Tell you what, by Alabama law, I fined you $10 for killing the man, and I hanged you for stealing the mule. Either way, it don't make no difference, because justice will out. That's the kind of Christ that John Conyers served. That's the kind of God that we serve. Rest well, John Conyers. You did your part. You represented. You represented. You represented.
Let the church say amen. Let us say amen again. The bishop has asked that we give them the benediction now. You may be seated to receive it. John Conyers understood that for 5 decades he was about the business of helping someone every day. When I think of John's long life of service of helping others, I'm reminded of the Negro spiritual, if I can help somebody. First sang and recorded by Benediction Jackson in 1963. The lyrics of the song must have resonated in John's heart, soul, and spirit, rendering unstoppable service to people. The lyrics, if I can help somebody, as I pass along. If I can cheer somebody with a word or a song. If I can show somebody that he's traveling wrong, then my living will not be in vain. If I can do my duty as a good man ought, if I bring back beauty to the world of Lord, if I can spread love's message as the Master's taught, then my living will not be in vain. Well done, my friend John Conyers. May we receive the benediction. God of creation, bless each and every one of you, knowing that God is with you and keep you, you will be kept. Amen.
We call for the Swanson Funeral Home to come. We certainly apologize to those who were not able to stay, who were on the program. We apologize to my good friend, Ms. Audrey DuBois Harris, who is one of the most melodious voices this side of heaven. We must get to the cemetery. Sunset is at 5:35, and we have to entomb the congressman outside in one of the walls that has been built, and we have a small ceremony that has to be conducted there. We don't want to be out in the dark. So we thank you all for coming, and we thank everyone who agreed to be on the program. And sometimes you just can't get it all in. We are thankful for your coming and for your prayers, for your support of this family. And we certainly are asking you to continue to keep them in your prayers, even in the days that lie ahead. The funeral home will come at this time. We want to thank the AKAs and the Eastern Star for coming and supporting your sister, Monica Conyers. Thank you for all of your kindness, all of your love. Greater Grace Temple staff, Swanson Funeral Home staff, all of those, Virgie Rollins and all of those who have helped to coordinate and to prepare for this great service. Ladies, if you will come to prepare to receive the flowers, Chief Ratcliffe, you're going to come and take us out. You may be seated while we receive the flowers.
To dream the impossible dream, to fight the unbeatable foe, to bear the unbearable sorrow, to run where the brave dare not go, to right the unrightable wrong, to love pure and chaste from afar, to try when your arms are too weary, to reach the unreachable star. This is my quest, to follow that star, no matter how hopeless, no matter how far, to fight for the right without question or pause, to be willing to march into hell for a heavenly cause. And I know if I'll only be true to this glorious quest, that my heart will lie peaceful and calm when I'm laid to my rest, and the world will be better for this, that one man scorned and covered with scars still strove with his last ounce of courage to reach, oh, to reach the unreachable. I want you to know that he always dreamed an impossible dream. Oh, and I know, yes, I know he's finally reached the unreachable star. Rest in peace.
The one and only Chief Bill Ratcliffe. Everyone, please remain standing as we proceed. I'll ask those ministers, Reverend Anthony, if you will lead the ministers out, the pallbearers will follow you. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in the green pastures. He leadeth me beside still waters. He restoreth my soul. leading me in the path of righteousness for his name's sake. And yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For thou art with me, his rod and his staff, they comfort me. He prepares a table before me in the presence of mine enemy, anointeth my head with oil, and my cup runneth over. And surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and so shall I ever be with the Lord.